is a world-renowned otolaryngologist. She specializes in all things LPR and the larynx, and she was trained at Harvard, Northwestern. She's been published in many, many peer-reviewed articles, and she's an amazing educator on the subject of silent reflux and LPR. So we're going to be diving into how to prevent acid reflux this holiday season, specifically Thanksgiving, how to navigate this, types of foods, things to keep in mind. And if you're new to me, my name is Molly Pelletier, and I'm a registered dietitian specializing in acid reflux, LPR, GERD. And thanks for joining us. We're excited to chat with you guys. If you have any questions when you're listening, feel free to comment them down below as well.
Great. Molly, thank you so much for that super kind introduction. I always say, I have all that training that checks all the marks, but I feel like one of my greatest strengths in treating patients with LPR is just having dealt with it myself.
Mhm.
So it's really just kind of putting that personal touch on things that work, don't work, what people need to know about it. And so glad we're able to do this chat. It's, I think, very timely with the holidays coming up and everything. A big question I always get asked is, what are some diet tips or how can I kind of navigate my reflux, on my own with what I'm eating and drinking? And I think it's really timely we have this conversation because holidays can pose a really big challenge to all of those recommendations. We're often somewhat strict, I think, with patients when they first get diagnosed, really to try to get symptoms under control. But
Yeah.
here holidays, here comes the big family meals to kind of throw a wrench in everybody's plans. And so I think, today we wanted to chat a little bit about that, about some things that we recommend to really give patients, followers, really practical tips to help them navigate these holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to dive into those for sure. It's definitely, it's an exciting time of year, but definitely can bring a lot of anxiety if you're someone that struggles with reflux. So hopefully this conversation is helpful.
No, I agree. I think one of the big conversations I think both of us have with patients is how much of reflux is mediated by kind of what we eat and drink and how and when we do it. And so a lot of our education focuses on kind of tips aimed at that to help kind of the bulk of reflux sufferers make some of those adjustments. So, I'd like to just start off the bat, like what is one of I guess what are some tips you have for patients when they're preparing for the holidays?
Yeah. So I think a lot of, making decisions that you feel proud of and making decisions that help you prevent reflux, a lot of it is planning. And there's always going to be things that we can't plan for. But one thing that we may not always think of is just communication with our family members. So thinking about, understanding the event, who's going to be preparing the food. If you have certain allergies or food intolerances or food triggers, maybe communicating that to who's there or understanding, what the ingredients are of certain things if you can. Um, Understanding the timing of the meal can also be helpful. One of the recommendations that we share a lot with our patients and clients is having an earlier dinner. So understanding, if this is going to be a late event, having your regular meals beforehand, having a high protein snack beforehand so that you can eat a little bit lighter that evening. And, it's not, I would never want anyone to restrict themselves during Thanksgiving and not participate in the meal. So, as best you can, being able to participate in that meal. Maybe it's a smaller portion size for you if it's a later meal, but planning ahead is key, so you know what's there, and you can bring something there to contribute. So if you know there's not going to be like a roasted vegetable side dish, or if you know there's not going to be a protein option that works for you, if you bring something that you can share with everyone and you know you tolerate well, that can be something that can help you feel more confident going into the
My cheesy self likes to use the slogan, sharing is caring. So bring
event.
a dish that you can share with your family and friends,
Yeah.
the dish that is good for you so you can enjoy in it as well. So I think that's a great tip because so much of the holidays is about kind of coming together, sharing a meal. A lot of people do bring or will ask their host, is there anything I can bring? If they mention a side dish, if they mention a dessert, you can bring something that is kind of more reflux friendly for that. I think another great point you made was when you're speaking with the host for the event, kind of getting a sense of what time is dinner actually going to be, right? Because sometimes we invite people over earlier and we expect about 2 hours and then they'll have a meal time or perhaps they'll be later. So, kind of really important to know that so that you essentially aren't starving yourself, right? Waiting for that.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to remember you can have reflux without kind of a heavy meal as well, right? You still have
Yeah.
your enzymes, the stomach still produces acid even when you're not eating. And so, without having anything in the stomach to really kind of soak that up, you can get a lot of indigestion and GI issues from, starving yourself or essentially fasting, waiting for that big heavy meal.
Yes, that is such an important, yeah, important recommendation. If we're going too long in between meals, there's that buildup of acid that can be really, really uncomfortable. So making sure that you're eating every 3 to 4 hours. For some people, maybe closer to three. Other people, maybe 4 to 5, if it's depending on the person and how much nutrition they can have at those meals. But yeah, really making sure that you're not, going over 4 or 5 hours without food. Even on Thanksgiving, we may have the tendency to think like I'm going to eat really light and
Mhm.
kind of skip a meal, but that actually can lead to not feeling so great at the event or not feeling so great if you end up overeating because you were starving. So it can go both ways. It's so true.
Right. I know for me personally, kind of the grazing method seems to work a lot better than the like not eating and then sitting down and having like a huge meal. So
Mhm.
sometimes that's kind of helpful, like building that into your schedule as well. Another tip I like to give people is essentially choosing the plate. So sometimes it's out of our control, right? Like a table is set up. But if you do have a choice, if it's more of a buffet style, maybe picking a smaller plate to fill up, your mind will feel more satisfied in terms of like how much you're eating, and you'll actually feel full faster with choosing kind of a smaller plate. So that can be really helpful to help you kind of control and prevent that overeating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I talk a lot about hunger and fullness with my clients, and keeping it kind of in the back of your head, like 80% fullness is a really great practice to get into. We can't always, detect this. Sometimes people have difficulty detecting fullness, but if you arrive at the meal starving, it's very difficult to eat to 80% fullness because your brain isn't really getting your fullness cues as quickly, and your blood sugar has dropped a lot, and so your body essentially will try to compensate and eat more at that meal. So, having those more frequent meals and snacks throughout the day really can help you eat to 80% fullness and avoid overfilling the stomach, which can be irritating for reflux.
I think most people have probably heard that saying, like, don't go grocery shopping hungry, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're kind of saying the same idea here that
Yeah.
go to Thanksgiving starving, right? It probably is not the best thing if you suffer from reflux.
Yeah.
We've talked somewhat about in the past about things like soups. It's the holidays, fall. What are your take on kind of soups and liquids with the meal?
This is a question that I get all the time because their liquids can be a challenging subject if you're someone with reflux. So, I usually recommend consuming most of your liquids for hydration, like water or herbal tea outside of a meal. Some of us, if you need some small sips of water to help things travel down, no problem. Having 6 to 8 ounces of water at a or tea at a meal should be fine for most people. I would try not to go over 8 ounces of fluid at a meal time because this can overfill the stomach and dilute your digestive enzymes and make it a little bit more likely that you'll reflux. So I recommend consuming most of your liquids in terms of hydration outside of your meals, 20 minutes after or 20 minutes before, and just sip, sip, sip throughout the day. Try not to like gulp all your water down at one time, just sipping throughout the day outside of meals. And then in terms of soups, that is, it can be pretty individual. Some people feel that soups are great for their reflux because liquids can empty quicker from the stomach than solids. However, some people also notice that smoothies and soups can be a little bit triggering for the reflux. Just the large amount of liquid in the stomach sometimes doesn't feel great and can be um, just too much, in the stomach at one time, and so it can be an individual thing, but I've definitely experienced that myself in terms of having a really big bowl of soup or ramen. Soups are delicious and oftentimes very seasonal, so if there is a soup at your Thanksgiving, my recommendation would be and you want to have it, my recommendation would be to have a small cup of that, so that you're not overfilling the stomach with both solid and liquid, and so just maybe a small side cup.
Great. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. So kind of I think what we're getting at is portion control is very, very important. Remember, anything, even if it's water, if it distends the stomach, it'll push on that lower esophageal sphincter and can trigger it to kind of weaken and allow things to reflux up. So portion control, really, really important. Even if it's something, that's on the, heavily inducing reflux standpoint, a little bit is a lot better than a lot of it. So can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
I
you
have, I just thought of something I did a
Yeah,
few years
sure.
ago, with soup at Thanksgiving. Instead of having the gravy, sometimes higher fat things like gravy could be, triggering for some people, for reflux, and so, I actually there was, like, a squash soup, and instead of gravy, I used the squash soup, so, like, that's a way you could use the soup if you were, trying to avoid an ingredient like gravy, but,
Yeah,
I have a lot of, soup recipes and acid reflux friendly sauces and things. I'll link them down below in the description as well.
I love that. I really like mashed potatoes, but I like kind of a soupy gravy type thing with it. So that's like a great idea. Put a little bit of like the soup with that. Yeah.
Mhm.
You had used the term gulping when you were talking about drinking soup, and it made me think of kind of we've talked about this before, but like mindfulness during eating. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that like be present in the moment of the meal, and so that you're really kind of taking the time to enjoy what you're eating. And it can be so distracting sometimes at big family gatherings and events, but we have studies that show that not being mindful usually leads to kind of again overeating, eating kind of too fast or rapidly, so it doesn't give your brain time to really process what's just happened, and so you keep eating because it doesn't know that it's full yet. And then
Mm.
also swallowing more air, which we call aerophagia. And so all of those things can contribute to more kind of reflux as well. And so sometimes just a simple task is just really paying attention to the fact that you are eating can actually help reflux as well. So I did think of that when you mentioned the term gulping, because that's what I imagine, like just like kind of quickly eating without realizing that's even what you're doing.
100%. This is so important. The rate at which we fill the stomach and the pace at which we're eating is key. And so, taking a deep breath, just notice the people around you and feeling grateful for the food and just, having a present moment, even if it's just like a couple seconds to really get present in your meal so that you can slow down, maybe put the fork down a few times. That is really helpful to honor your fullness but also chewing your food. Chewing your food is so key to optimizing digestion. Your stomach doesn't have teeth. So if your food gets to your stomach and it's not chewed well, your stomach might not really know what to do with that. And it can hang out there too long. It can exacerbate reflux. So chewing your food, having good posture at mealtime is another thing that can actually really impact reflux. So that have really helped my clients prevent reflux.
I like to put a little plug into grandmas everywhere. They knew what they were talking. I've had
Yes.
grandma was right. Yeah, she actually was. So we'll plug out to grandmas everywhere that, yes, that you gave some great advice and that we are kind of figuring out. So,
I love that early bird dinner, geriatric dinner timing. I think that's beautiful. Yeah.
so great. Well, I think, I don't know if you saw that question pop up. I don't know if we want to take that now or leave them for the end.
Oh, yes. Will you read it to me?
Oh,
I didn't see it.
um, well, actually, I did see it pop up, but then it looks like it disappeared off the screen. I think it was a question about maybe a hiatal hernia.
Oh,
Uh,
I see it. Jasmine's just thanking us for the advice. She was diagnosed with a hernia. She doesn't have a question, but if she was just thanking us for the advice, if you do have a question, feel free to drop it down below.
Yeah, so patients often, the hiatal hernia makes it really difficult. Essentially, that is a reason for having more reflux. So I tell patients, the hiatal hernia predisposes you to more mechanical reflux than somebody without it. So, really, all the tips that we are suggesting are great for patients with hiatal hernias just because they're more predisposed to reflux. So, thank you for your message. Hope you feel okay. But all these tips kind of are relevant for hiatal hernia sufferers as well.
Yeah, definitely.
What about, we've also talked before about stress. The holidays, as joyful as they can be, how excited we can all be for them, for a lot of us, they are associated with some stress, perhaps
Yeah.
stress and stress over, perhaps gatherings, seeing people we haven't seen all year, a whole host of things.
Yep.
What are your tips for patients who do feel more stressed kind of during the holidays?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been coming up a lot in my sessions with clients, and the holidays can bring up a lot of stress about food, symptoms, travel, and I think it's really important if your schedule is going to change with the holidays. Maybe it's a busy time, or you're traveling. It's really important to try to stick to the routines that help you feel your best. So, supporting yourself with maybe a 5-minute meditation, or having good boundaries with work, doing like a 5 or 10 minute check in the morning, doing some journaling about how you can support yourself that day, taking some time to do some stress management work, even if it's 5 minutes. There's 5-minute meditations on my app, FLORA, which I'll link down below. Really, really important to take that time for yourself, because stress can exacerbate reflux symptoms, and then reflux symptoms are stressful, and so it's this vicious cycle that we can get stuck in. And managing reflux and managing stress is really key for managing reflux and preventing that. So taking the time to take care of yourself in that way, and really think about how you can set yourself up for success. If there's certain things that you need to set boundaries around during the holidays or with family members, I would definitely recommend making that time to set those boundaries.
Great. Yeah, I think it's a great key point that how it kind of feeds on itself. And so, stress, I see a lot of it being kind of a throat doctor, how stress can affect all of that stuff. But it's important to remember that stress by itself, we never kind of just say, oh, it's just stress that you're having, but it can kind of exacerbate underlying reflux as well. And so,
Hmm.
stress management techniques are really important when we're dealing with patients with chronic reflux symptoms as well. Um, I wanted to ask you, so, you know, um, sometimes we fall off the wagon a little bit, right? So the reality of it is it would be a perfect world in which I could give up, coffee, chocolate, barbecue sauce, like all that stuff and live my life. But there are going to be times where I have to have a cheat day. I maybe
Hmm.
fall off the bandwagon, and this isn't to cause any sort of stigma or blame on anybody. But let's say this happens during the holidays or during a holiday meal. What are some recommendations? Is there any way to salvage this kind of slip up, if you will?
Yeah. So it's going to happen. It's natural to have, times where we, make choices that we know maybe a little bit more triggering for us, or maybe we eat a little bit more than a little bit past fullness, and that's totally normal. Um, One of the ways that my clients can, prevent symptoms after a meal like this is number one, staying upright. So really maintaining good posture, avoid slouching. Don't go to bed, right after a heavy meal. Try to wait, about 3 hours, and using an alginate like reflux raft can be extremely helpful. That creates reflux raft is a product. It's an algae that creates a gel barrier, or gel raft at the top of the stomach to try to physically prevent reflux, and it's been really, really helpful for so many of my clients. I'll put the link down below for that, but that can be a great thing to incorporate after a meal. Some people benefit from a gentle walk, kind of moving around, staying upright. Some people like that way of managing reflux, but it's really individual. Sometimes the walking can help a little bit with the gravity, so you can try those things out, and hopefully that will help.
The great tips. I actually I use Reflux Raft myself as an alginate, so all natural option after you've eaten the meal.
Hmm.
Other tips, really, let's say the meal is late and it was a heavy meal. You're probably going to stay up a little bit later than maybe usual, just to kind of give your stomach a little bit of time to help move the product down, so that's less likely to kind of reflux upwards. And then,
Yep.
kind of my take on some of this is, again, reality of it is there's going to be days where you're going to eat something that maybe gives trigger or was on that no list or whatever. But the idea is that it's not too late. You can still kind of salvage it and prevent kind of having some of those reflux symptoms. I would encourage, if it does happen, maybe don't compound the problem and say, well, I kind of already slipped up today, so let me just have some, soda or this or that, on top of it, because it truly does make the symptoms worse. We're trying to help you prevent reflux because once it happens, it's a lot harder to kind of stop. And
Yeah.
so prevent it in the first place is kind of the key that we're kind of aimed at here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's super important. And I think remembering that the holidays are, just a few days out of the year. And so if you're working to prevent reflux, if you have a day that's, more challenging with food, knowing that all the work that you're doing outside of that day is not lost. And it's just about kind of like, getting back on track with your reflux prevention the next day if you feel like it didn't go as planned or human and food is meant to be enjoyed. So trying to enjoy the moment as much as you can um, and allow yourself. There are a lot of reflux friendly Thanksgiving options too, luckily, like turkey, protein based foods, roasted squash, roasted vegetables, salads. There's a lot of there can be a lot of options. So hopefully it's a good day for those of you listening.
Yeah. Well, Molly, this has been great. I think
Yeah.
hopefully listeners were getting some practical tips here. I know I learned a few new things, so that's always a plus, a good thing, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for those of you who tuned in. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Molly. Bye.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anna. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Bye.